When we talk about the predictive and adaptive, so predictive is basically the waterfall, the traditional kind of approaches and the models where you can predict the outcome. You can actually have a better control with respect to the changes. You're sure that nothing changes. So obviously you'll have a lot of formality and detail there. Whereas with the agile, which is more adaptive to the change, because you cannot anticipate change. But once it comes, then you're ready to ready to engage with the team, embrace it, and then adapt your work style to work with the change. And that's why these are adaptive, all the agile methods. And that's why we have this prioritized list of requirements. We talked about backlog, right? So backlog gets prioritized. There's a product backlog, which is maintained by the product owner, that gets continuously updated with the requirements, with the tasks, features, defects, fixes, and change requests. All of that are just put into the backlog, and then they get prioritized depending on the importance and the urgency. We talked about prioritization aspects as well, right? We talked about Moscow tool that you can help that can help you to prioritize those in terms of the must-haves, and then the should have, could have, the will not have this time kind of a thing. So the prioritization would happen, and then a short list of those requirements would get into the sprint backlog, which is basically the time box that you have defined for your sprint, and then they are carried, the tasks are done, the execution development is done within that time box of 2 to 4 weeks, and then you deliver that, and then again you work on that continuous iterative incremental development. Whereas in terms of the BA work, so tasks are performed specific phases. So in the waterfall, you've got this, as I said earlier, I used to spend about 4 months initially in terms of gathering the requirements, 4-5 months go there, write the requirements, and then get the sign off. And then once you get that documentation, the sign off from the stakeholders, from the business customers and the business stakeholders, then that goes into the architecture, the design. So by the time it gets into development, it would be a good 11 months or 14 months of the time. Whereas with agile, you're not really going that way. You're not spending 4 months to write the requirements. You're actually trying to, because the fact is you're actually trying to look at the shorter term. You're not really looking at the whole project of 2 years, 5 years with an agile context, right? You're looking at, that's why we said that the visibility is reduced much, because you don't have much of visibility what's going to happen after 3 months, after 6 months. And that's why we're following agile. Yeah.
Why used to take so long to write something? Why? I mean, why is there so much time spent on writing a project? Is it like a project proposal, right?
No, it is the proper project, what goes into the project, right? So that the requirements are basically the entire bunch of what you want to do with the product, right? So that's the reason
So
you're thinking what will you do. Yeah, the FRS, the function requirement specification, business requirements document, SRS, software requirement specification. It's all about what the product is supposed to do, and you're trying to think right now what is going to happen for the entire 3 years down the line. So you're not talking about getting the requirement ready and getting it done in the next 1 week, next 3 weeks, or 1 month. What you're trying to do is you're actually trying to spend all your energies as BA to work with the business, with the customers, and making sure you get a complete picture of what it's going to do, what it's going to have, what is coming in terms of administration, from the user manual, from the customer stuff, from the customer relationship management, how the requirements come in, how the customers are identified, how the customers are created within the product, what kind of data are we talking about, how are we actually creating the reports, the whole thing you actually start doing right now. That's the trouble with that, isn't it? Because you try and get the perfection, because of the fact that you want to make sure you understand everything from the point of view of what the product is supposed to deliver. Now, right now, what could potentially happen after 2 years or 3 years, you're trying to do now. And that's why you go into so much of in-depth detailing of all of those, and you go and spend each of them, expand each of that particular epic or requirement into all the details, going into the level of identifying the database, the formats, the data types, and then where does it come from, the source and the tables in the database, the way it should look like, everything you try and put it into the requirements document. That's why it used to take such a long time, because you're trying to capture pretty much everything about the product, what it is supposed to do and what it's supposed to have as features and benefits. But The trouble is you spend so much time, and then the customer also gets to review all of that. Okay, says fantastic, or no, this is not good, this is not good, and then he finally agrees, okay, this is good enough now for you to develop, and that will take, let's say, 1 month. So after about 5-6 months, you've got the finished, the frozen, signed off requirements, and then you start with the architecture. With that in mind, that's what gets passed on. That 400-500 page document gets passed on to the architects, the designers, the TAs, the technical leads, to start working on their side of things, and they would spend another 3 months to come up with the whole architecture for this, because they're also, again, they're not looking at the next month, they're looking at the entire 3 years or 5 years, the whole product, right? So they come up with that.
Yeah.
They spend a good 2 months to 3 months to come up with the architecture, the high level design, the low level design, and then the components and everything else. So and again, that goes through the churn, and finally by the time it actually gets to development, that's when developers are brought in. They start looking at the things, and then they'll go through all the whole thing, requirements, understanding of the requirements, workshops, and understanding the architecture, the design document. It would take at least a good few weeks for them to get used to it, and then they start developing. The first line of code would be written then, right? So the trouble with that is, this is all fine, it's not about the time it takes, that's all fantastic, but the problem is, initially you assume that everything is going to be frozen, it's all done and dusted, nothing is going to change, and that's why you spend so much time, 4 months, to create that, and the customer also is happy with that. But the changes start to trickle in right when you start writing the first line of code. So you everybody assumed that it's all going to be frozen, there's no change and all that, but the changes start happening right from the customer. In fact, the customer who signed off have said everything is frozen, there's going to be no change, and they are the first person to actually give you the changes. No, it's not supposed to be like this, they should be this way. Let's not use this product, use this product. The technology choice is wrong, let's have another technology suite, right? So we should use different tools. The customers have changed, their profiles have changed, their needs have changed, so bring it in. So by that time, what you're trying to do is, there are so many changes, and by the time you actually deliver the first cut of the product to the customers, to the business who wanted this, there would be no less than 300 to 400, 500 different changes already in the requirements, and the customer, perhaps that business also would have been already taken over by somebody else, the sponsor. The sponsor would have changed in that in that gap of things. So that's the reason why it failed, isn't it? That's why all these the traditional waterfall kind of things have failed, because they are not able to take in the changes. They're resistant, they're averse to changes, whereas Agile has assumed that it's bound to change. We have assumed right from the day when we're assuming that it's okay, don't worry, it's bound to change, let's not worry about it, let's look at what we're going to do in the next 1 month. So Agile assumed that change is inevitable, and if change comes, we'll look at it, we will try and absorb, we will try and embrace it, we'll work on it. Whereas the waterfall was not like it. Said no changes, signed off, that's it. And so their whole assumptions were completely fallacy.
How long ago was that?
That was about a good 10 years ago, at least from my practical work experience, till about 10 years ago.
Nobody uses that, right? Or still people are?
Well, it's funny because still there are some companies which use that, but then the point is, if you are sure that they're not going to change, no changes are going to happen, and that you're, as we discussed the other day, if it is already a product that is already developed, and if there are compliance kind of regulatory products that you're working on, then I think that's something where you can work on traditional waterfall type. But otherwise, other types of projects, it's not. Most of them have already moved to Agile, one form of Agile or other. Yeah. That's why, I mean, there are a lot of risks involved in that traditional waterfall, right? It takes a long time, and the point is, from the time you start the project to the time it actually delivers the first line of code is a good 9-11 months. Whereas with Agile, you're actually delivering in the first 3 weeks. You've got something that you can look at. You don't have to waste time in doing all these kind of things. And the team is empowered, customer is engaged from the day one. You're delivering something to the market really quickly. All those benefits that you have got with Agile over the waterfall. Yeah. So in terms of complexity, there are different factors like the number of stakeholders, the number of business areas affected, the amount of nature of risk. We talked about all these things, right? The type of requirements, the functional, non-functional, technical defects, and the requirements of the resource, the skill set, all of these come into picture. And that's why we have to really look at all those angles. And then that's the reason why Agile is preferred more than the waterfall. And again, in terms of acceptance, how would the customer accept your solution, your delivery? Again, that needs to be discussed, that needs to be reviewed and then planned ahead for it, even before we start